Welcome back to the MMA Creators Podcast, episode number 92, I do believe. Now, I wanted to start this episode on a bit of a random note because you just mentioned, right as we punched record even, that you were showing off your old logo. And I said, speaking of old stuff, I was talking to one Breezy who works with Against the Fence, another big MMA YouTube channel in the space. And he was talking about how when he was doing research for a podcast episode with you, he found your old fitness page on YouTube or Instagram or something, but it had been scrubbed clean. And I was just curious about what was going on that page, what you were doing on there, maybe any lessons you've learned, things you look back on, because obviously when I look back at my old videos, I always hate them and I have I cringe when I look back at them because they're nowhere near as good as my current stuff. So I don't know if there's any lessons you've taken over the years since, the early times you started doing content creation, but fill me in.
A very ambiguous question, first and foremost. What have I learned over the last 5 years?
To be fair, that's definitely not the one to start off with, but
what I will say is,
we go big.
No, it was a fair point. And it's funny you say that because when I did the Food Fighters episode with him, he asked me a few questions along those lines as well. And it was a complete area of the internet I forgot even existed in regards to information that I put out there. But for anyone that doesn't know, I used to create content around fitness. I was a personal trainer, still am a personal trainer technically, created content in that world and then put a bunch out. And if you're going to ask what is one of the big takeaways, I think one thing that I'm capturing now more than ever is bringing along people on the journey. You said they were my worst videos. They're your first videos. They're the things that people actually want to see. This is what I'm realizing with my training footage, which I've been going absolutely insane about putting as much out as possible.
I know, I've seen.
I put hundreds of clips out now a week of just me training, of small details from the training, because everyone's seen the best. Everyone's seen Saenchai and Israel Adesanya and Alex Pereira and Conor McGregor. We know what the best looks like. There's not a lot of people that put out getting better, starting from zero, starting from scratch, whether that's in fitness, whether that's in Muay Thai in this instance, or whether it's in content creation. So I've really, over the years, embodied the casual mantra and putting out more of that content. Coming back to your question, that's probably what I'd say.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, sorry for such a front-loaded question. I think probably a simpler way to start saying that you could probably take this question any way you wanted to. So it is also kind of open-ended. But obviously with the stress of your upcoming event, come UFC London, your pop-up store or stop event, whatever you want to call it, obviously rolling out tickets officially now. So the gears are well and truly in motion. Everything is moving. How are you feeling in T-minus, what is it, less than 3 weeks now? Or it is actually 3 weeks today out from the event. I know it feels like we talk about it every week, but I know this is your big thing. Everything is building up to this. So I feel like it has to get brought up, whenever the opportunity arises.
It's fair because there's a lot going on. So it does take up and consume a lot of my week. So when we obviously sit here and we chop up what we've been up to, it's always what I've been up to because there's so many pieces to fit together of this jigsaw. And some of them are a lot less glamorous. Some of them are dealing with Eventbrite on the back end because your event isn't indexing on certain search features and things of that nature. Some super tedious and, like I said, not very glamorous at all. Some of them a lot more fun. Some of them a lot more stressful, dealing with manufacturers that are working to deadlines on their own time and not my time, which sometimes can be. But really, what is stressful about that? There isn't anything really. I think there's either two things to come of it. This is how I try and deal with it. There's two things to come of it. Firstly, it's my fault. Whatever the answer is, whatever the issue, is, it's my fault. I have full accountability to it. So if the manufacturer is reaching out to me to say, okay, it's not going to be here until the 21st, even though it should be earlier, that's my fault. Secondly to that, there's just lessons to be learned from it. There's always things to be learned from it. And thirdly to that, you have to adapt to these things that happen. Okay, if this doesn't turn up, how can I adapt it? And not even just how can I adapt it, how can I improve it? How could this actually be a positive? And what you start realizing is all of these things that seem in the short term like negatives, if you reframe it, usually you can work around it a lot better. And I'll give you an example of that because it sounds kind of a bit loose. On one of my platforms, the CPM just drops towards the back end of the month. It's very jarring. It's happened a few times now. Very, very jarring. On one hand, you can look at that and say, well, that's very frustrating because you're getting a paid almost nothing from almost a lot. So there's a big disparity, right? But where is the positive to that? Well, the positive to that is now I don't have to focus as much on content which maybe I know indexes well or lean into things which I know will perform well. I can be a little bit more experimentative with what I'm actually creating. I can actually try different techniques, different styles, different vibes of things that I'm working because I know that money isn't attached to this on the back end as it usually is. So yes, stressful, but just reframing and taking accountability for everything that happens at the moment.
It's what you sign up for as well, right? I mean, these are the sort of pitfalls and the things we accept when we enter this world. And I could definitely relate to that in terms of a struggle and particularly stress over the last couple of weeks. Because as you know, and as I mentioned on here and within my streams and elsewhere, I was working on my big Volkanovski documentary, which I actually put out yesterday. So that was quite a big moment for me and a very stressful one because I had very high expectations. The numbers are they're doing fine. They're doing like okay. And that's what the really frustrating thing is because I feel like this is just a general sentiment when we are creators. This is just how we feel that it's never really enough. You can never truly be satisfied with what you've got. And again, that's always a double-edged sword, good and bad. But being right in the middle of the road always just sucks, especially when you put so much effort and time into this piece of content. And I feel without a shadow of a doubt, it's the best piece of work I've ever made. And I guess it's just that anticipation and waiting. Sort of, I'm trying not to check the YouTube Studio app every 15 minutes, but it's a difficult challenge. And again, I know we talk about not getting caught up in metrics and numbers and trying to just see things for the way they are and almost detach yourself from them to an extent. And I'm generally good at that, but this is the first time where I've really invested this amount of time and this amount of effort and been this considerate towards the little details within a video project. So it is a big deal. It does matter a lot to me. So I've been stressed a lot about that recently, particularly with the rollout and communication with the brand I was working with, trying to get the all clear to put the video out and this, that, and the other, various re-renders, worrying about copyright issues. I mean, I could go on. There's so many little elements to the production pipeline which can just throw you off your game, mentally. It can be a real struggle. But the video is done, so at least there's that relief. It's out there in the world, and now I guess it's just in fate's hands. But it is. I'm not going to pretend it's not stressing me out. You know what I mean? I feel like people like to pretend that they don't care about these things. Content creators in particular, but they do. I think they just pretend that they don't, if that makes any sense.
I don't know if people pretend they don't. I think most people do. I think it's probably fair. I think a lot of people... I think you led with the most important piece of information and then continue to speak and it almost counteracts it because you led with saying, this is my best piece of work.
I did, to be fair, and it is.
There's not really anything else to it. On to the next.
Yeah, I think where the stress and struggle comes with it is.
Do you see my point, though?
No, of course I do.
You see my point. And I'm being inflammatory, but I do believe that.
No, you're right, but I think with that comes with the fact you want to be vindicated. You want justification for your hard work.
Why?
Well, because it has, I mean, innately, if we're talking on maybe a more shallow front, but it's true, financially and from a numbers perspective in terms of growth on the channel. And it's almost like a reflection that not necessarily the video is good, but that I'm doing the right thing, if that makes any sense, on in terms of getting the right audience and attracting viewers, new viewers, old and new. So it's a balancing act. I don't know. And also because I had this plan of switching to monthly videos and really committing to that. And I really hope to sort of kick things off with a bang, that sort of proof of concept, like this is the way to go. This is what's going to work now. And obviously, even with that, there was never going to be any guarantees. Like that's just the nature of the beast with YouTube. You never know how many views a video is going to get until it's out there in the world. But I don't know. I guess I just hope for more. And maybe I will. Maybe I'll be eating my words in a week's time. And I hope that's the case. But we'll.
My point to all of this is all of the questions that you're referring to have already been answered. You've already got the answers to those questions. So that's more my point is it is almost wasted energy. You say, I want to be vindicated, right? So that comes back to essentially the question of, will one video a month perform well? Should I transition into that? Well, you've already answered that because you've already established you don't really like doing more and doing them more frequently. You don't enjoy the process as much. And the world has already proven there is a blueprint to suggest that doing less is more with those type of videos. So all the proof is out there. You've answered your own question. Now you've done it. You've also done it to a level which you say is the best it's ever done. And if I were to ask you the question, if you create these videos and they continue to get better, will you continue to grow and get more money? The answer is yes, because the blueprint is out there. So everything is answered. So I don't really...
That's a good point.
I get it, but all the answers are there. This is more my point. I get stress. I get the understanding that there's money attached to metrics and all of these things. I understand all that, but in my opinion, that's all emotion, right? So how can we take out emotion and look at more facts? Well, we can look at questions and we can look at the answers to those questions, and they are all there. So everything would suggest that you do this, do it more consistently, and continue to improve. It will eventually happen. Will it happen now? Potentially not. Will it happen next week? Potentially not. But it will eventually happen. So I think it's just wasted energy. Put that energy into your next project, your next piece, and get better.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. I think looking at it on a sort of macro scale, that's what I try to do. That's what I tried to do before, even when I was making the weekly videos. And if I'd have a dud, if you want to call it that, a video which didn't perform very well at all, even if I thought otherwise that it should have done better. I think the only thing with something like that, when you're doing weekly videos, it's a lot easier to move on to the next one, right? Because you haven't invested as much time and as much effort because you had to cut the alternative? I don't know. Exactly.
Dwelling?
Yeah, exactly. You can't. You just got to shut up and get on with it. Yeah, I mean, that is it. Yeah,
that's literally it. Yeah. That's my point. And I'm not saying
wasted energy.
I'm perfect.
No, you're completely right.
I completely understand. But this is something that I'm just big on now because I've tried to work at this myself. This isn't just this clicked overnight for me. These are things that I'm trying to work on. But the more skin you get in the game and the longer you do it for, you realize that you're constantly in different seasons, in different dips, in peaks, in troughs, and you just have to zoom out more. What is the overarching goal? Well, the overarching goal is a 10+ year brand. Okay, well, is there any need for me to get really caught up in this minutiae detail in a week? Where, do you see my point? You just have to zoom out a little bit sometimes. So, yeah.
I guess my point, it was just harder. It's harder to zoom out when you've invested over like a month of working on a video over a month than it is for a week. So.
Sure, but what is a month
the jury's
in 10
still
years?
Out. Very true. Very true. And the jury's still out. The jury's still out. We've got time. It's only been out for a day. What am I waffling about, man?
It's been out for a matter of minutes.
It's not like it's doing terribly. Like it's on like, what, 7,500 views? I guess I just expected more. But maybe that will come. Again, I'm not going to get too caught up in it. There's more important things to focus on, like the next project, which is actually what I was doing before we punched record. I decided to, sort of strip back, just look and just do some real hard research into formatting, titles, inspiration, anything. And I came up with a couple of ideas I want to work on. Maybe one that won't take a month, but maybe as a small project, just as something I wanted to tick off. I was thinking about doing a video on Hunter Campbell. And I feel like there's an interesting angle there. The problem is, ironically, the way I wanted to frame the video is exactly the problem. There's nothing
No
about him
footage.
online, man. There's nothing. This is exactly it.
Yeah.
So I'm still debating whether I do that, and if I did, it would definitely be a sort of short excursion. But after that, I was thinking about doing a big. I know you always say it. You're popular. This is quite a popular opinion of yours. Is Dana White is just the centerpiece of everything on YouTube within MMA. He's always a good one to do a video about. So I thought, and I know I've been and danced around those waters before, but I thought about doing a dark side of Dana White, complete, with this new monthly format, being able to completely cover every base as best as I can and really go in depth and really go theatrical. And yeah, that's where I'm leaning at the moment. Or a Bilal Muhammad documentary too. That's also a potential, but I don't know how. Out of curiosity, on your end, I know short form is a bit different, but how does Bilal videos tend to perform for you in terms of popularity?
It's not really, to be honest. It doesn't really matter if it's short form or long form. People care about certain people. It's really as simple as that. It's not that TJ Dillashaw's going to perform well on long form and people don't care about him on short. It is just not. Doesn't really work as linear as that. So, sorry, it does work linear like that. Bilal Muhammad. Yeah, I think you get what you get with him in regards to he splits opinion, right? You get some people that are big fans of him. And then you also can't ignore the fact that he brings in a large population when it comes to religion as well, like Khabib and Islam and people like that. So that can't be ignored. And then on the flip side, you have people that really dislike him. So he's actually kind of the perfect storm, really. And he's pretty good on the mic. He's pretty charismatic on the mic and whatnot. So I think that's a good idea. I think that Dana White is always a good idea. That's always a gold mine that you should dive into. And I think I really like what you mentioned about doing a deep dive into sort of the dark side of Dana White. I think that's perfect.
It's a good title. Yeah.
And it's a great title, actually. Deep dive into the dark side of Dana White. And there you go. That's for free. I've realised I've got a new... I don't know. Can't find it anymore. I've got a weird new wrinkle on my chin. Like a dimple. I can't stop noticing it now. I've never had myself facing myself when we've done these. But now I've got it. Now I can't stop looking at the fact that I've got that. But coming back to original point.
No, I see it. Maybe you don't want me to see it. Is it something you don't like?
No, I don't know. I just feel a bit Uriah Faber-ish, but...
Yeah. Start falling a butchin.
Talking about Uriah Faber, I managed to go through some of my UFC Macau content this week and forgot that I had a couple of gems with Justin Gaethje. So I've clipped up some funny pieces of content for this week. And honestly, that's one of the biggest things that I've got on top of. We spoke earlier about improvements, getting ahead of the game, being proactive, like we said at the start of the year. Proactive and leverage were our words, right? That they were the big words that we've been driving home, and they're the best words. And for me, being proactive was the major part. And that's exactly what I have to be with the run up to this pop-up as well. So I've already got my complete week's content clipped, edited, scheduled across all platforms. I just sent over 60 pieces to my personal assistant who will be scheduling that. And then that's not on top of the 5 or 6 that I'll be putting across from Instagram every day. So we've got a good 10 pieces of content every day on the platform, across my platforms next week. So that's done, and I don't have to do a single thing onto that as of tomorrow. So I can really just focus on toe wrestling, which is obviously the event that we've got coming up.
Oh, I was actually going to ask you about that. I saw you on a shoot. That looked pretty mental.
Oh, my goodness.
You mind just breaking that down? Because I saw a NASA sign. I don't know what the hell was happening. Please do elaborate.
I'm glad you brought this up, actually, because we haven't spoke about this. That was insane. That was insane. So, I don't really like the word imposter syndrome, right? I don't love that word. I just don't love it. But I think that was the first time I had actually felt it properly. I actually did think that. Even though I've had some phenomenal experiences and some very cool moments. I've been able to walk out in China to a packed crowd into the octagon and step on the canvas, and very cool experiences. Didn't feel any type of way at that. I felt like I was meant to be there. I was doing my job, to be honest. This kind of different because we're in the studio and we have a very talented script writer there who does comedy scripts, who's a friend of the guys who run the production studio. So he's written a script for a toe wrestling promotion for the London event. So he's there. He's the main director. We've got a full camera crew, film crew set up, essentially. There's actors, there's extras, there's a whole bunch of jargon I've never heard, ever, in my life. There's a whole bunch of equipment I've never seen in my life. There's a whole bunch of new jobs I didn't even know existed. There is one main job for someone on set to just make sure the focus is perfect on the camera equipment.
Yeah.
Just the focus. They sit with an alternative monitor and they just make sure that the focus is perfect throughout. I said to the geezer, I didn't even know that was a job. It's incredible how there's so many levels of detail on a film set is unbelievable. Even the fact that someone went to university just for color grading. Just for color grading.
That's something I neglect actually in my content. I always I don't really do it at all, which it was bad. I should. I think it's just one of those, in the pipeline for me, it's one of those things that comes at the end. And at that point, I'm like, the video's done. I can release it here. But I guess I should spend some time learning color grading for sure. I mean, it's complete, as you said, there's a deserving role for it because it's a hard thing to actually get right. It's a difficult skill. People actually completely forget that when they're watching, to the untrained eye, it's an afterthought,
What I will say now, practically for you, just on this topic quickly, is a lot of these platforms now, they have copy and paste features for them. So you can actually get screenshots of scenes that you like the color grading for, which kind of suit what you're doing. And then you can essentially just copy and paste the color grades over. Now, so there's a lot of good tools and techniques to make it easier. It doesn't mean that you become an expert overnight,
no,
but
definitely not.
For the average consumer or producer, it can be a lot easier. But going back to what I was saying, so I'm on this set with these flipping actors with lines and calls and different words that are happening, and I'm just there in my casuals clothing jersey, just with my arms sort of linked, watching it. And the director's sort of asking the people involved in it, but also just turning to me and saying, is that all good? Any feedback that you'd like to add? Any notes?
Mate, Dana White, mate. Get used to it.
I was thinking, I haven't got a clue. a clue. Literally. The only thing that I had input on is this man was doing a line and he did it once and then he did it the second time and he just added a slight huh on the end of it. And I said, let's keep the huh. And the director turns to me and goes, that's a great touch. And I was thinking, I just standing there cross-eyed, I was like, my day has been validated perfectly.
Make it till you make it. I mean, I remember when we first started doing this and you told me when you went to I believe it was the Volkov Aspinall fight night in UFC London. It might have been an earlier one than that, but you spoke about how you were just taking a camera and pretending to be official media pretty much and just waffling your way through to opportunities, and you don't know how you got there and you just felt like a fraud, and in many ways you were because you didn't know what the fuck you were doing. But that's not a bad thing, and it's kind of crazy to fast forward to now you're helming the ship here. You might not know what you're doing, but you're helming the ship and you're learning on the fly, and I think that speaks to something. I mean, the fake it till you make it mantra or saying, might be overused, but it really does kind of ring true. Like, it's all about the face you put on, and the hard work is done behind the scenes, of course, as you've proven to have done. So I think although you might seem, or you said you had the imposter syndrome or that you're out of your depth in some capacity, it's not. Nah. I think it's only a positive thing. It's not a bad thing at all.
I think as well, you hear that a lot, right? Fake it till you make it. And I 100% believe in that. But I think sometimes the wording of it doesn't paint the full picture for people of what that actually means. Because sometimes that can be misconstrued. And I remember writing just in my notepad one day. I just write different things down, write little poems here and there. And I remember just writing this one line. I'd never said it before. I'd never really thought of it, but it's so true. It's the line of, I squint my eyes when looking at my own reality. That's the best way that I can explain everything I've always done. I just squint my eyes very slightly when looking at what is actually happening. Okay, I want to be a professional Muay Thai fighter. Well, the reality is I've never trained, I've never competed, I've never done this sport, and my priorities are elsewhere. So is the reality me going to do this? No. Is that a priority of mine? Not really, no. Okay, well, how can I adjust that slightly? Well, I can train, improve, make videos, wear my clothing in it, get branded sponsorships for the videos, and then create money and revenue off the back end of that as well. Okay, well, now I'm getting paid to train, so I'm getting paid to do a sport. You're a professional. I always just say, if you're getting paid to do it, you're a professional in anything. That's why I always say professional toe wrestling. If you're getting paid, you're a professional in it. So it's not that you fake it and go out and say, hey, yeah, I'm a professional Muay Thai fighter. No, that's not the fake it till you make it. It's just squint your eyes when looking at your own reality. And your reality is sometimes very nuanced. That's another thing people don't talk about as well. It's very nuanced, a lot of these things. So, yeah, I think you're 100% right. But coming back to originally, yeah, the shoot was flipping insane. So that was really, really cool. And obviously, I wasn't the lead on that day, right? Everyone knows the production studio are very well versed in that. That's exactly what they do. And I was kind of just observing, but I was also there for different reasons, right? I was there to create content for the events as well coming up. And also I'm standing there on the set and I'm thinking, this is why I say about imposter syndrome and things, I don't really buy into it myself. I've done the work. I'm there on merit. I'm having these conversations with people. I'm comfortable being vulnerable on these places. This is the thing that people don't usually do, is they're not comfortable being vulnerable in positions where they may not have knowledge on certain things. I'm comfortable going up to the guy that is doing this particular job and asking him about it and just taking interest in, I didn't even know this was a thing. A lot of people would be worried because they don't know what's really going on, or they want to seem like they have this full scope of knowledge. But I know why I'm there. That's the thing with the toe wrestling as well. I know exactly why I'm there. I know what my strengths are, and everyone else knows why I'm there and what my strengths are, and vice versa. I know what Ben's strengths are, Connor's strengths are. These are the guys that run the studio. And we all have a position and a place to fill. So I think it's also just being more comfortable in what you know and being vulnerable in what you don't. Being a casual is a true embodiment of the word. It isn't just a brand name. It's a true way of life. And I do try and bring that into the brand any way that I can.
Yeah, I like that. Being open-minded, and I think unashamed is a good word to use there. Because I feel like a lot of people, they have that fear, right, of speaking out or asking questions out of fear of seeming like they're intellectually subpar or inferior, rather than just taking the initiative. I think that's taking the initiative is a good way of putting it. That's something I try to do, and I hate to bring it back to jiu-jitsu, but I feel like I have to, because it's actually quite relevant to me in the last couple of weeks, because I've been through a lot of ups and downs of having good sessions, and then like on Tuesday I smashed it, had a great session, and then on this Saturday, yesterday, I got my arse handed to me and was getting absolutely schooled, and I ended up doing a round with one of our coaches, and he was letting me work, and he was just, I didn't feel pandered to or frustrated or as I said, intellectually inferior because I didn't know a certain technique, or I was missing out on the stuff, or he was guiding me through certain things. It's because I needed it and I understood that. And that's a mindset shift I probably wouldn't have had if it wasn't for jiu-jitsu. I think if I had that in a different context anywhere else, for let's say in a work environment, in a social environment, I don't know, I probably wouldn't have reacted the same way as I do now to those sort of situations. So that comes back to what you said, being open-minded, taking the initiative in trying to learn. I think having a thirst for learning is important. And whether that's in the creative industry, as you said, I mean, with what we do, actually, it's really important because we are fundamentally, we are self-employed, but fundamentally, as I said, it's quite an isolating role. We do a lot of the heavy lifting ourselves. So it's on us in many ways to, as I said, take that initiative, and be willing to learn the skills and practice. And as you like to say, of course, put the reps in until you are at a level that is, I don't know what the word is. Let's say acceptable.
Well, I think that's a good thing that you ended on there in regards to the reps, because that's another one, right? I was watching back these clips as I'm editing them of the Muay Thai, and I'm thinking, that looks terrible. And I understand that I'm new and I don't do it a lot. So I give myself leeway and understand that I'm not confused. Why doesn't it look like this? But it comes back to that point again. You know what? I actually do want to improve this. I'm going to just have to do more reps. So on Friday night, I go and hit the back, about 50 kicks each side. Very slow, trying to go through the technique of it and whatnot and trying to actually improve it, because that's really all it comes down to, is how much time have you given to this thing? This is really all the answer is to anything. Anything. When people wonder why they're not good at something, why they're not improving at something, why they're not getting better, firstly, do you want to get better? Are you looking for the answers to improve? More times than not, people aren't. And second of all, how much time have you given to it? Oh, I want to get in shape. Okay, well, how long have you tried to get in shape for? 2 weeks and then said you failed and stopped? Or have you tried to do it for 10 years? How long have you tried to create a YouTube channel? Have you made 2 videos and they didn't blow up and you stopped? Or have you done it for 3 years relentlessly? Like, how long have you been doing these things is also a point. You have to have some self-awareness. If you're trying to be a professional boxer, you have no coordination, no athleticism, and you've been trying for 3 years, you need to understand, okay, this actually maybe isn't for me. But it comes back to my point that I made to you earlier. You need to know the answers before you're actually going into it as well. Is there a blueprint for this particular amount of success? Has someone just gone cold to starting an MMA channel on YouTube and making it their full-time job? Yes, they have. Do they have similar skill sets? Yes, they do. Do I do things well that these guys don't do well, and vice versa? Yes. So I'm going off on a bit of a rant there, but time invested is a big one that I'm kind of getting into, right? 10 years. Nothing remarkable was made in less than 10 years. Nothing.
That's true. That's very true.
Nothing.
And you see, speaking of time invested, in a lot of ways, I'm going to have to disagree with you, because speaking strictly in UFC terms, one man who has invested very little time in the grand scheme of things, yet achieved everything and more, is Alex Poatan Pereira, of course, headlining UFC 313 in just a few short years. I mean, this man has gone from, relative unknown in the combat sports world, if we're talking about, to a casual audience, to being probably right now the sports poster boy and biggest star, because Conor McGregor is nowhere to be seen and his best days are far, far behind us. And it's the Poatan era. And I'll have to give you, with this natural segue, my early prediction. I don't think it's stopping anytime soon, because I think he's going to knock out Magomed Ankalaev inside 2 rounds.
Yeah, firstly, phenomenal segue. And secondly, not to be pedantic, but just to elaborate on the point. Even then, right? 2-time Glory kickboxing champion.
Of course, sure. Yeah, that's why I specified UFC.
And I know you know that. But I'm just playing into the point again, right? Yes, he comes into the UFC in 2021, I believe it is. But that's with a lifetime, decades of work outside of it, grafting. He hasn't just picked up MMA in 2021 and all of a sudden he's a double champion. But yes, going back to your original point, I'd like to think so. Stylistically, I agree with you. In regards to skill for skill, I agree with you. The only thing that slightly worries me is just the workload. The workload is just so intense. At this point of his career, 37 years of age, this would be his what?
He's 37.
If he were to win, this would be his 4th defense in 12 months. And it's not the fights. This is what I try and tell people. It's not the fights. And it isn't even just the camps. When it's that level of superstardom, it's the travel, it's the seminars, it's the interviews, It's the media attention, the media obligations, and of course they all have pros to them. But my point is, it's just energy, right? It's just more energy. And when you have all of that energy compounded on top of the point of there being hard training camps, compounded by a lifetime of work in the striking realm and a lifetime of miles on the clock, that's the part that worries me. Against someone who, for all intensive purposes, is fighting for this opportunity for his first ever time, right, in Ankalaev. I know that previously they had the whole draw thing with Jan Blachowicz. I believe that's for the interim belt. Am I wrong?
No, it's for the undisputed.
For the undisputed belt, right? But again, vacant a draw. Title. So he never had that. So this is kind of like a new opportunity for him. That's a big difference. So also you have to factor in Ankalaev is going through Ramadan. Is that going to play a factor?
Oh, good point.
Potentially, you know, there's a lot of things at play here that are deeper than what do I think the style matchup is, because I think the style matchup is Magomed Ankalaev has 10 knockouts in his career and 1 submission loss. Alex Pereira has 10 knockouts in his career and 1 submission loss. I think this is going to be a stand-up affair. I don't think that Ankalaev is going to wrestle. I don't think he's going to hold him down. I don't think he's going to submit him, ground and pound him, or anything like that. I think it's going to stay standing. And as long as it does, you're in deep water with Alex Pereira. I think he knocks him out in the 3rd.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be that patented left hand, does it not? That's the shot. I mean, call it stating the obvious. I mean, that's a hard thing to do in MMA, you know, a game that's so unpredictable. But if there is one certainty within it, is that Alex Pereira will find your chin with that left hand. He's done it time and time again. He can do it walking backwards, as we've seen against Yuri Prochazka. So that's where the money is, I think, that left-hand shot. But I almost think people are sleeping on Ankalaev in a lot of ways, because I actually think his striking is pretty damn good. I was doing some sort of tape study, minor watching, just sort of recreationally, and I was like, he's got some nice, he's good with his kicks, powerful kicks, and he's just disciplined with his hands. Like, it's nothing special, and it's not flashy by any means, but it's effective. And as you said, a lot of finishes in his career, and people seem to have this understanding that he's a wrestler, and I get that probably comes with the sort of, you know, Russian background and the name, of course. Yeah. So there is that general sentiment towards him. But as you said, the stats don't lie. He's a striker first, really, at this point in his career. I think it's a fascinating matchup. And as you said, well, you didn't say it, but I think the general sentiment is it's Pereira's toughest test. And, you know, with that workload and with this point in his career and the damage he actually took in that Khalil Rountree fight, making him seem a little bit mortal for the first time in a while. You know, there are realistic possibilities for Anu to be bellowed out in the arena, but that remains to be seen. What I'm more excited for is the new replacement co-main event. And people were very excited when Dan Hooker was to take on Justin Gaethje. And that is the definition of unstoppable force meets immovable object. It was a fight everyone was excited for. But if you're asking me, now that Rafael Fiziev has replaced Dan Hooker, who left with a broken hand, which one's the more exciting matchup? I'm saying the latter. I was there at 286 for their first fight. It was an absolute barn burner slugfest. And I think this one's going to be even better. Fiziev's got a point to prove, a chip on his shoulder, not just because he lost their first fight with a close decision, but he's been so long out the game with that devastating injury. He wants to come back and put on an absolute clinic. And against a man like Justin Gaethje, who is coming off not an injury, but a brutal knockout finish at UFC 300, on top of the fact he isn't getting any younger, I think we're going to see a better fight than the first. And I think Rafael Fiziev is going to come out on top with a decision win. Mike drop.
I don't know if the fight is any better or any worse. I think it's same but different, really. I think if you put Dan Hooker in there, it's just extremely fun. Yeah, that's my point, right? You got Justin Gaethje. We know what we get from him. You know what you get from Dan Hooker, and you know what you get from Rafael Fiziev. I just think it's more of the same, but also kind of different. Hot take. Hot take.
I'm intrigued.
Rafael Fiziev is the toughest matchup stylistically for Islam Makhachev.
I actually agree with you. I mean, off the top of my head, I agree with you. Mainly because of the way he fights, just the way he strikes. That man is a demon with his hands and his feet. He throws like he's trying to kill you with every shot. The one I look at is the Renato Moicano fight. Obviously, also a man that Makhachev has just beaten. But if you look at the way Fiziev finished him back in the day, he throws like a 2 or 3 piece combination with the hands. and
to the
each
body.
and every one of them, he's trying to knock him out. Yeah, and he clips him twice and floors him, and it's basically a wrap at that point. And that's just basically a microcosm of a snapshot of the way that Rafa Fiziev fights. And Makhachev, for all of his success, is proven not to be immortal in the same way that Khabib was. He does get clipped. He does get hit a lot. He's willing to go into that fire, and there comes positives and negatives with that. But I don't think you can do it against a man like Rafael Fiziev. And if he's to get a win against Justin Gaethje, I mean, immediately that's springing him back into the title contention. He's got the popularity, the sort of cult following of a small country like Azerbaijan. They're going to be backing that man to the end, so there is the passion there. On top of the fact, he's also got a fighting style which is just entertaining to the masses. People are going to tune in to watch him fight. Might not have the personality to back it up to an extent, to a wider audience.
Know.
But if you're asking me if that's an exciting fight against Islam Makhachev, should he beat Justin Gaethje? I'm saying absolutely, and we could see him skip the queue. That's a realistic possibility.
He can't just beat Justin Gaethje. He can't. He has to knock him out. I agree, off on principle. He has to knock him out.
Knock him out. Agreed, yeah.
He has to. Right?
And you think
That's
he can
the
do
thing
that?
with Fiziev. Of course. That's the thing with Fiziev. I think it can, but it could go both ways. The only issue that I saw in the first fight, that Justin Gaethje was a great win. And the fact that Justin Gaethje came off a loss and then started to rebuild himself against the top contenders, the dangerous contenders, then put a win streak together, then go to look for the lightweight title, super impressive. Not taking anything away from that performance. I just think that Fiziev helped him win that fight. I really do. He was just overcommitting to his strikes. He got caught up in the sauce. He got caught up in the build-up. If you remember the build-up, it was the most exciting fighter, the most exciting fighter. He got caught up in that 100%. Yeah. He played into it. Same way we see it with Michael Chandler. He doesn't have to try to be exciting because he will be. That's just his style and how he fights.
Agreed.
He needs to be a little bit more calculated, a little bit smarter. He needs to set his shots up. He needs to actually pick his shots. If he stands in the pocket and brawls, he can knock anyone out and he can have an exciting fight with anyone. But I think if he wants to be the champion, he has to just fight a little bit smarter. There's a reason why we've never seen Michael Chandler as the champion. There's a reason. And it isn't because he doesn't have the skill set, because he is very skilled. He's very skilled. Just that when it's game day, doesn't implement a champion's game plan. Yeah, just it's a major thing, right? And especially when you're fighting Justin Gaethje, I get it how you can get lost in that, but I really think this fight could go either way. But I also do think it's a bit of a passing of the torch moment, right? I do think it's the sort of the old guard versus the new guard to a certain extent, the human highlight reel versus Ataman. Yeah, it's going to be quite exciting. I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah, I mean, he might be Fiziev's always been one of my favourite fighters, not just in the division, but the roster. So when we heard that was a rumour for the replacement, I was like, that has to happen. If you're going to pick anyone to fill that space, it has to be Fiziev. It just makes sense with the narrative coming back off of the injury, as I said earlier. That's a fight that's going to ignite that fire in his belly. And it's a matter of, as you said, whether he gets lost in the sauce like he did last time, caught up in that sort of a dogfight, right? That's the mistake he made last time. And I think Justin Gaethje can just do that to people, regardless of whether they want it or not. Gaethje can make a fight dirty. He can slug it out and bring you to his level, because he might not be the most technically gifted, but he will take you there. He will match your energy at the very least. And he could do that again to Fiziev, so that remains to be seen. But innately, as a style, styles do make fights, and this one makes a particularly great one indeed. And another one I'd say is just going down the card is Jalen Turner versus Ignacio Bahamondes. That's just another great fight. Two fighters which are innately exciting on their own. Fire meets fire. Very little needs to be said there. It's just going to be a great fight. It's good matchmaking.
I think that's a bad matchup for Jalen Turner.
Do tell. Why do you think?
I just think it's going to stay standing. And I think if it stays standing, Bahamondes will beat a lot of guys. Funnily enough, he was actually one of the first fighters I ever did a review video on when I first started this channel. I think it was in 2020, 2021, something along that line. National kickboxing champion in Chile, sure. That's not the highest accolade of title, but my point is, he's been striking for a very long time, and we've seen it now at the elite level. That last knockout that he got, fading back, stepping across right hand, looking like Sean O'Malley, that was beautiful. To do that at 6'3" with that level of power and precision is very, very tough. Very tough. And talking of tough, he is also a dog. He's got that in him. He's got that to fall on as well. So if he is in a fight where it has to become a little bit of a firefight, he can battle through that. And then you just look at the smaller details, the people he's training with. Obviously, he's in the camp of Bilal Muhammad. He's seen someone in his camp go and be champion, which is a major difference. He's not too far away now. He's in the rankings. He can see the blueprint. It's like what I was saying to you before. Have the questions been answered? Yes, they have for him. They have been answered for him. They've seen that blueprint, right? It's all a lot more visceral now. It's all a lot more real life. What, I go out there and I beat Jalen Turner and now it's me. I get 2 wins and I'm fighting for the belt. So I think there's going to be a big performance from Bahamundes. Don't get it twisted. Jalen Turner is super talented everywhere. Nothing really would surprise me on his end because he's capable of great moments. But this is the question, right? We're on this tipping point. This is what I kind of put out in a piece of content. We're at this tipping point now. Is it Jalen Turner who's going to say, you know what? I actually am that guy. I am that guy. I am a menace on the ground. I can submit you. I can knock you out. I'm putting it all together. I've had a lot of experience against the top level guys, and now it's my time to kick on and put a run together. Or, on the flip side, is Bahamundes going to say, I'm a very legitimate problem for everyone at 155? That's what will get answered this weekend.
The one I look back on in terms of Bahamundes, the only thing I can think about is that last sort of 20 seconds it was spinning wheel kick he landed back in. Of course, it was a random Apex fight night, if I'm not mistaken. You know, undeservedly so.
Roosevelt Roberts.
Good shout. Yeah, it was Roosevelt Roberts. Yeah, what a knockout. I believe that was. Did that win knockout of the year, or at the very least, it was nominated 2022, 2023, something along those lines. But we know, as you said, what he's capable of. Disciplined striker, as is Turner, to his credit. It's one I'm very excited for, and I think it's just going to be a finish either way. I don't see that one going to a decision. But one thing I did pick up on, just looking at the prelims, you know, there is that running sort of meme, right? You have the 2 highest pay-per-view stars, you know, slugging it out to a pretty boring decision. But yet on the prelims, you'll get 2 flyweights fighting to the death like they're in the Roman Colosseum. And Joshua Van versus Ray Tsuruya, I butchered that. Just seems like one of those. Joshua Van is such an underrated fighter, and he just brings it, man. Same thing, you know, he fits that meme to a T. He's just going to go into the fire and see if he comes out, you know, with a couple of 3rd-degree burns, but hopefully with his hand raised. And I'm not going to pretend I know much about his adversary, but, you know, flyweights, as we always say, are them and the bantamweights are the technically most high level and gifted fighters on the roster because they have to do so much more than in the other divisions. There are so few corners they can cut to be the best, and that's why, in my opinion, flyweight fights are always the best and the most exciting on a technical level. So it's one I'm very excited for. I don't know if you share the same sentiment or if there's any other fights on that card that are sticking out to you. But
yeah, I think Mauricio Ruffy and Bobby Green.
I'm looking at that.
That's a no-brainer. I think that one's really fun.
Sorry,
I think
King Green actually.
No, it's not.
Sorry.
No, it's not. It's
not.
not.
I still. Yeah,
it's not. He's getting called Bobby. You're getting called Bobby. I'm not calling anyone. I hate that word. Since it has had this resurgence into pop culture to say, "Oh, good you point, go man. King." I hate that. It makes me cringe context, for sure. To my core. So I can't say the word at all these days. Let alone call a grown man who has changed his name to King. No, your name is Bobby. You're getting called Bobby. It's really as simple as that, to be perfectly honest. But regardless, I'm looking forward to that. I think that's a fun fight. Shout out to Sam Patterson last night for getting another win.
Oh, yes.
I have to give him a mention. That was a very good win on his behalf. That's 3 now in the 170-pound division. Yeah. And then as well, you've got Mario Pinto, who had a very good knockout as well. And
oh, mate,
the UK produces another heavyweight. Come on.
Mate, we keep going. I mean, you said, I don't know if it was before we punched record or after, that MMA is kind of boring sometimes. And obviously I do agree with that sentiment for the most part. But looking at this card, I think there's a lot of good matchups going on here. And looking ahead at the UFC 314, obviously we're not going to break it down. We will save that for another day. But I don't think the future's looking too bad, particularly for British MMA, as you just mentioned earlier. But I
think he's good. I know you're going to wrap up, but I don't want to finish on a somber tone.
No.
Let me just explain my point. It's a Saturday. You chuck on a fight night, and you see a couple of unranked guys that have come off the Contender Series, and fair play to them. They're making their career. They're hustling, but the standard of some of the fights is just piss poor.
Is there anyone you want to call out there in particular? Or is it just
not really?
General sentiment?
Not really. I'm just saying the roster's getting huge, right? They're making really strange calls on who to cut. Maybe there's more to it.
I saw that they culled a bunch of guys, right?
Yeah.
Recently. Very weird.
For example, getting rid of Josh Kulabau?
Yeah, Josh Kulabau. What's that about? He's fun. Fun fighter.
What's happening there? What's happening there? I'm not too sure. But my point is, the rosters are just getting bigger, and the general level of talent is getting lower. It just is. So the average fight is getting a lot lower level. Sure, there's still people say, but there's this and that. Yeah, there's obviously a lot of good fighters. The premier fighting organisation, for sure. But there's also some fights on there and I'm just thinking, you've got a guy that's 10-8 fighting a guy that's 12-9 on the prelims at middleweight, and they can't really strike to a higher level. They can't really grapple to a higher level.
And they don't have the cardio, so after a minute and a half,
they haven't got a lot of cardio, right? So people always say, I'm going to do it again, people always say about the heavyweights, but it only takes one. No, it doesn't. Have you ever watched heavyweight MMA? It doesn't only take one. It takes 1 minute, and then 90% of them get out of breath because they're not good athletes, for the most part. And then they can't land a knockout shot anyway. So I'm not trying to be super scrutinising, but it's just an observation a lot of people have made in the sport, and I never subscribe to it as much just because you're new and these guys are good and things like that. But once you start learning the sport a little bit more, you start realising, actually, come on.
We do get a bit jaded sometimes. That's just the nature of the beast. It's the nature of being a reformed hardcore fan of mixed martial arts. I think you go through that phase of being a casual, then to a hardcore where you get obsessed, and then you sort of revert back to almost being a casual again, with a bit more knowledge and insight into the sport and the game we love. But I think that's a good place to wrap it up. This has been the MMA Creators Podcast, episode number 92, I do believe, and we will see you again next Sunday, I hope. Have a good one.
Galsip song.